All right, so on today's episode, I'm welcoming David Isaacs, owner of Isaacs Pools and Spas. I recently bought a hot tub from there. It's amazing. But we're going to talk about employee motivation and turnover. 2 years ago, at least, he had 11% roughly annual employee turnover, which is unheard of. Say this is the construction industry in general. There's not, if you're trying to segment it out, it'd be a little more technical. But in general, you have over 50% turnover in that industry, and he had 11%. And so we're going to kind of look at then versus now challenges and so on. So welcome aboard.
Thanks, Brad.
All right. So before we get going, just tell us about yourself, about your company, and how, I don't know, give us a not an elevator 20-second pitch here or something, but just generally maybe within a minute or so, give us a rundown of kind of your company and how you started it.
Well, it started in 1978, year I was born, and then I didn't want to be in it, so I actually attended Milligan College, tried to become a teacher, and all that didn't work out because my father passed away in the age of 45 in 2002. And through kind of a circuitous, convoluted series of events, I ended up with the business in like six or seven. From there, we've been able to move it to Johnson City and grow it to a couple locations, and that's where we are today.
All right. Well, talking about family history or what have you, the company's been around for a long time, I'd imagine. What's your longest customer, or like, how long have they been around?
Yeah, so that one I do have a good answer. So I was a little kid, and there's a Polaroid of me in 1988 helping build the swimming pool in Elizabethton, up off of G Street, for those who know where that's at. And that lady is still our customer. And so from 1988 to now, and you're smarter than I am, you'll have to do that math, but that is a long time customer. And we actually have a lot of customers like that. But she's the one that comes right off the top of mind because I've been giving a lot of thought to the fact that people stay loyal to you that long. Literally, we built the pool in 1988. So she had to be pretty young to build the pool in 1988, still be, living in the same house and still having us work on the pool. So that's pretty special.
All right. I don't know if I'm smarter than you. Weren't you working on a Florida State doctorate of philosophy or something? That would blow my mind.
Yeah, well, that wasn't in math.
All right. All right, let's go ahead. So a couple years ago, we'd presented maybe about a year or so ago at Summit Leadership about this, but I think it was about 2 years ago, roughly, maybe not that long, but in the ballpark. You were about 11% over turnover. And I was interviewing your employees, trying to get kind of a feel for why that was. So I have a couple of things, and I don't want to get too specific just for anonymous sake. But like, we're first of all, 11% to now, is that about the same, or have things changed in the last couple of years, or where would you put yourself now?
I look back to 2017 when we started tracking that number, and it really does hover in that 10 to 12% range. Even through COVID, it kind of stayed there, even though that was a lot more challenging. But 10 to 12% is where it has stayed.
Okay, that's interesting. And how many employees do you have roughly? Around 20, probably
25.
25. So I mean, that's pretty good numbers, especially if you look at construction as a whole. You'd be expecting 50% turnover. And again, I guess we could specifically get more into before we move on to the nuts and bolts. You don't actually install pools often. I think you've kind of pivoted. That used to be your bread and butter, I'd imagine, back in the day. Now you're more on the spa maintenance and repair and sales. Is that correct?
We still have the construction side, but we do renovation, and so it's still kind of construction, but no new builds are started anymore.
Okay. So when I was interviewing your employees, which is amazing that you would actually ask me to do something like that when you have, your 11% turnover. Most people would say that's great. We don't need to even worry about that. But what I found that there's like three areas, and a lot of this, I used Herzberg's two-factor theory. So we could talk a little bit about that too in a minute. But I'm a huge fan of like having some model to use, some type of theory. Like I've seen Maslow's used really well too to analyze a company. Like for example, the hierarchy, like the bottom level, like are you taking care of their baseline needs, like pay and salary, and do they have job security? That's like the basic level. But then as you go up the pyramid, of course, like are people able to achieve things that are internally motivating? And then Herzberg's I like a little better because It looks at things like company policy, job security, and those things, and salary even, or it says salary, but any kind of pay, incentives. And it says, well, those aren't motivating long term, but you have to have them or employees are dissatisfied. So again, I don't want to necessarily get too lost in Herzberg's theory, because without him, I guess I could pull the model up on the screen, but like that's the model I used when I interviewed your employees. And basically what I found, there was a few areas that I remember off the top of my head here. One was job security. They didn't say it directly, which gets into this idea that it was indirect. Like employees, you could tell that they felt comfortable and that they weren't, it wasn't like they were walking on eggshells or anything like that. Like they felt like they had a stable job and that you were trying to be relevant in the industry, but they didn't necessarily say that, but it came out indirectly. A second one, or the one I've noticed most, and this one in the literature is always up there, is recognition. That was the most motivating one, I would say. And those were the two. And then, of course, like um, they said family a lot, which normally when companies say we're trying to make it like a family, it's usually like it fails because it's just, we're going to just say that. And but it has to be authentic. And so that came out in most of the interviews. So those are the three I was thinking of. But like, what are your thoughts on why your turnover so low? Are those three a big part of that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I didn't have a clue who Herzberg was until I read your book, The Motivated Worker. And so that was really helpful to me. But, really it starts to me with just growing up in a family that cared about people, genuinely cared about people. So, when employees work for you, I genuinely care about them. I also really appreciate what they do to help this business function. I mean, you got days out there when it's 98 degrees and you watch your guys come dragging in after being out in it all day. That has to impact you as a human. And then when you have your guys out on difficult jobs, maybe in a service side of it, or your retail store has a long, hard day, you have to have some kind of empathy for it and some kind of sympathy for it. It helps you respond as a human to say, I really appreciate these folks. But then you have to, so that started that way. And I just get that from my parents. I don't no accolades for that, but I'm built that way. But then you have to institutionalize it, and that's where it gets difficult because when you don't have just three or four people and you have 25, you have to make sure that the gratitude, the show of appreciation, is extended out through your company and through your systems, let's say. And so I think that's what we focus on, but it starts with a genuine feeling that, we are a family. But I don't like saying it either, Brad. It feels very disingenuous to say, welcome to the family. Like even when I say it, it sounds wrong. So I don't say it. It was interesting that people from you found that that's what they felt about it. But when we looked at Herzberg and I started looking at how I want to tell you the Herzberg is a punch in the face to a small business to some degree because when you look at the hygiene factors, we're talking about good pay, job security. You have an employee handbook that kind of details your job and things of that nature. Well, it took me 10 years to come up with even a tiny part of that, so but now when you look at the theory, it's kind of suggesting that if those things are present, that's a problem, right? It's hard to motivate people if they're thinking about not being paid enough or if they're thinking their job might not be there next week. But it's still true nonetheless. That's exactly how it works. So we put all those things into place as best we could to create the foundation, so to speak. And then when you look at those motivating factors like recognition, is the job meaningful, those types of things that Herzberg talks about on the motivating side, God, it really put it in perspective for me what you could feel as a business owner trying to make it work. That here was a theory that was applicable in modern day, to exactly what I was experiencing. But at the same time, and I may have told you this, but it's kind of like a punch in the face because it took so much to be able to provide health insurance, for example, and to be able to actually pay livable wages. Like that was no easy task as a small business. So, but I am glad that I was introduced to the theory. It has been in a practical way very helpful for me and the company.
Well, yeah, that's even with as small a business as you are, offering health insurance and those kind of things, it's getting to a point where it's easier to, not do that or contract employees, like use contract employees, but then not offer that. So that's again, I would say that goes into the job security, and that obviously they care, that you care about them. There's a debate going on right now too of like, is it the employee, whose responsibility is this? And actually, one of the things I loved about reading Herzberg back in like, I think his first book came out like 59, was that it reads just like it was written today. people expect someone to subsidize their health care. Like none of us go out and say, you know what, I should go buy my own, health insurance. Back in the Herzberg's day, even he was like, for whatever reason, employees or citizens or whoever expects somebody to subsidize it, and it somehow fell on the employer, because other countries it's the government subsidizing it, we're the employer, and then of course there's a mix of like, well, if a lot of people fall in the cracks.
Yeah, that one's tough, right? We just went through the renewal here, increase of 12%. But I was looking back over 8, 9 years. There were years it went up 25%. There were years it was up 12. Like you average it out, it's north of 10 to 15% almost every single year on that. And talk about we pay 100%. So it is a subsidizing to the employees, but it also is a huge expense to the company when every year it's rising that much. And then this year, the 12% on top of the premium we currently have is tens of thousands of dollars. And it's just really hard to absorb that. But it goes back to the point, do people care about having it? Well, they do. When I hire people, their eyes light up whenever I say I have insurance and I can offer it to you at no cost. That's a big deal. And so, we fight the battle with the expense side of it. And we offer it. I think over 20 of our people are on it. Some of them have better insurance through their spouses, but yeah, that one's a struggle, but I do find that one being a big reason people stay.
All right. Well, I'm pulling up one graphic from Herzberg here. Just ignore all of the stuff at the bottom. But when I was writing about this, I thought the graphics were, somewhat useful. So let's talk about, again, I said earlier we might not go through all of these, but I can't help myself. So supervision, I think a lot of these are easier at smaller companies too. For example, like your supervisors are very like one level below you, and then you have employees basically. So if you're talking about a massive corporation, it would probably be an immediate supervisor. But what Herzberg basically said was people don't get excited that they have a competent supervisor. It's an expectation. However, if their supervisor is like, doesn't know what they're doing or makes the work environment intolerable, then it'll be a demotivator. So long story short, that's how this right side works. And what's interesting, if this theory is somewhat true, you're talking about benefits. So salary and benefits should be on this side too. Um do employees, do you think after a while take it for granted that they have them, or do you think that
Yes.
they come in every day, they're like, yes, I still have benefits?
No, they definitely take it for granted.
And
I
I
don't
would
I
imagine
don't
this
I don't
is,
blame them. I don't blame them. They just get used to having it. And then at some point it's not part of the computation in their own mind about how they're being compensated here. And sometimes that is a struggle.
and you pay very well for your industry too. And so if you take salary and benefits, and I know that you've worked really hard on a employee or like a manual or a what employee manual or whatever that's in your industry is unheard of. I don't know of anyone that gets excited about that. However, if your policies and your salary and all of those things were bad, then they would be probably be looking for other work or something. But the fact that they're there is good. It's like the foundation of a house, but they just get used to it. So does that, I don't know, does that get frustrating, or is that just kind of how it goes?
Brad, I'm going to let your readers inside my company here a little bit more than I probably should, but I'm going to do it. It makes the point. There have been times where I had meetings with employees where I would spend days researching their compensation. So if they had a company vehicle, what did the gas card look like? What did it look like they didn't have to actually pay for a set of tires over a period of time or fuel? And then what did their insurance look like? And those were because the perception that an employee had was that they somehow weren't getting paid well. And it's only because they see the money in their checking account, not the taxes removed. They do see that. They don't see the taxes on the 941 paid on their behalf, the unemployment paid on their behalf to the state and federal. But they don't see really that money that leaves my hand that goes to the insurance company for them. In one exercise, I actually brought in that money. It was a lot of money. I brought it in cash and I handed it to the person in addition to all the other work we were doing there on looking at what they actually made. And then when I grabbed it back from them, I said, that's how I feel whenever I pay your insurance. And I said, you have to think about it that way. And I know that's a little bit tough, but I was having a hard time getting through to a person what they were actually being paid because most of it they didn't see. The insurance is parsed off on their behalf out to Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the gas card that's being used to take you back and forth to home is paid. And so that is pretty unusual, but it does happen. And when you get an employee who doesn't fully understand what they're getting paid, it creates a problem. And so I find myself having a reaction to where I'm saying, not getting upset. I'm going to say, let me show you what you get. That one particular instance, I worked hard. I had the W-2s from the last 3 years because there was a claim that they didn't get paid more. And if you actually look at it all, everything that they had said to me just simply was factually not true. But here's the point: that doesn't even matter. If they're not motivated to work for you because they think that, you either have to take the time to sit down and show them, and they still may not believe you, but you have to address it. If you don't, it just festers and gets worse, and it doesn't do anything good for the company.
Well, I think it is important to, to at least, annually or whenever to go over with employees exactly what the, total compensation is. And I think it's regardless of industry, like most of us that we're working, we just look at what competitors are doing. And so it's we don't necessarily even care about, I hate to say this, but the employee, it's like you just expect the employer to be able to figure all that stuff out, and then you're just trying to compete. But at the same time, I think it is good to explain, like, here's the total compensation. But what I was trying to talking about, I guess, with the hygiene factors, and this is why I really like Herzberg, is he's basically saying you could even up bump the salary up tomorrow, even increase your benefits or whatever. That will just become the new norm. But I don't know how long it'll motivate. Not to say that you shouldn't do that. And what I noticed when I interviewed you in your employees, I don't know if I interviewed you, but I interviewed your employees, and recognition. Now, theoretically, here's how this theory works. So recognition wise is great, but if you have a terrible salary, no one's going to care that they're recognized per se. Like, it'll be like, that's great, but there's no way I can stay here. So this is like the foundation of a house. Fix these things, and then this is the true motivators. A lot of your employees like the work itself. Some wanted more. Again, I don't want to get too. If you want me to edit this, I can. But some wanted more advancement or growth opportunities. That was probably only a couple. Most really liked the work itself. They could see their job completed. They can actually see, this is important today too. When you're on an assembly line, you might not even know what your job contributes to the total good. So they can see a job start to finish. They feel recognized and all of those things. So, what was there anything there that rings true? Like, do you, as far as like the recognition and all of that, like, would any of that matter if you didn't have the foundation set?
That's exactly what happens. That's why the theory is very helpful for me as a small business of 25 employees, is because you can thank them all day long for their work. You can wish them happy birthday. You can get them a gift card. But if they go home and their paycheck doesn't help pay the bills and they're having strife at home to live the life that they're accustomed to, that's all they're going to think about. And because I'm tied to the money going into the checking account, that's going to create a hygiene factor that becomes present. So they're going to say, I'm just not making enough at work. So I can thank them all I want, and they're going to appreciate that. Most folks here do, but it's just not going to be enough. And I think that's why I like the symbiotic relationship that's there in the chart you just had up. Is you can't just do one side or the other. You have to do as much of each side as you can, or it doesn't work. You will have a dissatisfied employee, because that's part of the motivating side, is how do you get them satisfied, right? Once you've met the need, in other words, the hygiene factors aren't present, that they are reasonably happy with the security that it looks like the job has, or reasonably happy with the truck you put them in and the tools they have that creates a somewhat safe working environment, a reasonably safe working environment. They make good enough money to be able to live the life that they do. All of a sudden, they're not thinking about that. Then, whenever you do show gratitude or something like that, it works better. And like you said, if I just raise the salary, there is a honeymoon phase. For a couple of weeks, they're pretty happy, but then it's just the norm, and it doesn't get anything done on the motivating side. Hardest lesson to ever learn for me, I will tell you that. And like I said, if you look at that employee manual, that's not a cheap thing to do. I know there's a lot of websites, I won't name them, but if you really want to get it specific to your industry and your company and the state and locale you're in, you might want to get a good attorney to help with that. But that salary, to be able to pay that kind of salary, that's an adjustment through an entire business. And that's how you charge. It's how you control your expenses, because there's no way you're going to pay a lot of money for employees if you can't actually have it to pay them. And so that's why I say it took a decade for me to actually put all those pieces in place to where we were actually finally able to motivate people. And really it just boiled down to, do you care about people? Do you care about your processes? Do you want to make sure they feel good working here? And do you want to take all the extra time and work to recognize them? It's really the Herzberg principles and theory really helped put the framework together for me. Not that I wasn't doing some of that, because I felt like I needed to do it, right? If you care about people and you want a good business, you're going to do those things. But seeing the chart made all the difference, and it really put a conceptual framework together for me to make sure I'm not allowing hygiene stuff to pop up. And if it does, I better address it very quickly. And I do. Those things I address usually within the same day or the same week. I don't let those things fester. The recognition side is a little tougher because I have to do that through a supervisor position, because I can't do it for all of them, right? So then you have to systematize it. And so we've worked really hard to do that. Not perfect, but I think we do a pretty good job.
Well, yeah, let's get into recognition because this always in the academic studies always comes up as the number one global motivator. So recognition. So like, what are some ways that you do that, and how do you make sure it's consistent? I actually, part of me thinks it becomes a hygiene factor at some point, because then if you're used to getting a card every year, and then let's say you forget a year, then it'll be like, oh, like I was expecting a card. But anyway, as far as the recognition, how do you go about doing that?
So this just requires work. It requires planning and work, and it requires meetings. So one simple thing that I do as an owner is I always text happy birthday. Very simple. And then, on more than one occasion, more than 50% of the time, I will play happy birthday on the piano, which I don't do very well, but it's the thought that counts. And in some cases, if somebody's bought me a shirt or something like that, I'll try to throw it on and make it a little more personal. But that's one thing, and we generally get them a gift card, and I think that goes a long way. I think more than you would think it would, that you actually took the time. We generally recognize the work anniversary. We don't post this to a Facebook or anything, but they certainly hear from me. They hear from their supervisor. That's just part of our practice, right? So that has to be done in meetings, and people have to be reminded. If it's Veterans Day, we make sure we thank the folks that have served there. It's basically just a system of expressions of gratitude. The birthdays are happy birthday, but the other stuff's thank you for working for a year. And then, as you scaffold that, once we get to 5 years, we recognize them in front of people with a gift card. And we actually have a breakfast, and we bring all the guys in, and we stand them up in front of all the guys with whom they work and give them a gift card. It's quite a bit of money, but then at 10 years, it's quite a bit more. We do it as the same way at 10 years. And that's something I've been able to do, I guess, just for 10 years, because we've had several people here that's been here for more than 10. So in those ways, that's more the systematic way we do it. And then in addition to that, we have our meetings with departments. I head up the retail store. Uh, I actually make sure that part of the design meetings is that they express gratitude to one person in that group in front of the rest of them. It may be Miss Johnson called and said, "Y'all did a fantastic job. I just wanted to say thank you in front of everybody. It's hard to make her happy. Y'all must have done something right." Things of that nature, but those have to be like built into the structure of meetings, which is what we do. So like line item number one of your weekly meeting is, you better thank somebody. I know that starts getting really routine and maybe doesn't feel sincere, but I don't know how else to do it, and I want it done. And when we have our annual or monthly executive meetings, there is an entire section in that meeting that we call praise reports, and the whole point is just to go around the table and say good things that have happened, because we're getting ready to dig into the hard things in those meetings, right? It can get ugly. And so I think that's where the recognition comes in, is just institutionalizing it, but also just being a good person and actually telling somebody you appreciate them. But if you don't, you got to have that mix of it being genuine as well. But you also have to get it into your systems. It starts looking like CRM, like the dealership up the road here. I get a happy birthday email, and the salesperson has no idea he sent it to me. That's a certain kind of detachment I don't like. We do not do that. So, but at some point, they're all doing the same stuff. But here, I don't think of it as CRM. I think of it as, I really do appreciate the employees. They deserve recognition, and when they get it, um, they're going to be a whole lot more motivated and happy.
Awesome. Yeah, and do you know, I guess if you're looking, because again, we talked, when I came in, it was like 2 years ago versus today. So I don't know what the total inflation has been, but like now it's back to normal, if you will. But a few years ago it was, 8, 9% or what have you. And we've never really come back from that level. So it's like the baseline has shifted. So even though now we're at the normal, I don't know, let's say 2 to 4% or 3% a year that we normally have, but it was up for, quite some time. Has that, I don't know, has that hurt? Like, how is it trying to do all of these things that you've been doing? Is it tougher now than it was 2 years ago?
Yeah, all the same things I'm telling you, we still do it. The problem is employees now, if we're talking about the salary, we're talking about the hygiene factors. It's present. There's no doubt it's present. And it was nothing that I caused, right? I didn't cause the inflation, or maybe I did. I don't know. Maybe you can have some argument there, but at some rate, the inflation caused it. It's on their minds because they can't pay their bills, right? So what's the first thing that happens when the money coming into your checking account from your company doesn't pay the bills? Um, you think about where you work, right? It's, can I go back and get more money? I can't pay my bills, right? And it's, I think inflation is one of the biggest evils in the world, but because it's such a large circle of mess that happens. So yeah, it's been very difficult, and so think about the way I fix that. Okay, let me go ahead and add 20% to your paycheck because that's actually what's needed. I've sat and looked at that for them to come back to somewhat of even, if you want to call it maybe to 3 years ago or so. And for me to do that, then all of a sudden my customers are being charged twice as much for service calls and whatever else I have to do to make it up. Well, guess what? Those people are also struggling with inflation. And so they're, I mean, I can hear it over the phone. They're very upset. And so I don't know how to really do it. So it's present, it's a problem. And what I did this year, Brad, to solve it, and this is the first time I dealt with it specifically. We've always given raises, like, we've talked about this before, where 2 or 3% raise or 5% is not even touching the rate of inflation that happened over the last few years. But we started a program called People Helping People. I wanted to get all of the people that work for me interested in giving money to people. So we would give them $200 to go out to support any cause that they wanted. That was new this year. It turned out that we ended up giving it back to the employees because the people helping people made no sense without giving it back to the people who were struggling the most. So we actually had a meeting where I actually did that via gift cards to them. I think they really appreciated that, and I talked about this in the in the in the conversation about inflation. But something we committed to. But I might get in trouble for doing what I did, but I gave $20 per paycheck to every employee, and I made that at the same time I made the People Helping People program go back to them. And so that $20 over 25 employees is going to cost me maybe 20,000 in a year. And this was during the summer. And I said, I know you're hurting. It doesn't sit well with me. And I was like, I'm going to commit right now that I will do $20 for 52 weeks. And that goes back to next summer. So we're still about in the middle of it. And you talk about painful. I'm not collecting more money from customers. I'm already at very little profit this year because of the cost of goods and the expenses, because I'm in the same boat as everybody else with inflation as a company. So I think those things went a long way with employees. And my thought about it, right or wrong, was that you need to recognize the employees that they are struggling, that they're struggling, that it's a tough time. You also can say that here's every bit I'm going to do to try to help with that. And then and part of that conversation was you got to do something yourself, right? You're going to have to pull back yourself on things to get through it. But on my part, this is the sacrifice I'll make as a company. I'll give you $20 a week. And I hope that helps with groceries. And it was a really, I think, a very nice speech that was given to them from my heart that was very genuine. But you know what? It takes the money to pay it. And it also took the time to schedule the meeting, and it took the thought of wanting to do it. And I think that goes back to what I always say. It's just about the work. You can find creative ways to help them. Some businesses are big enough to put on business classes and say, "Let me look at your stuff and let me maybe guide you in this or that and try to help you." And I'm not saying we don't do that, but ultimately, that hygiene factor is present. The way I dealt with it was what I just told you, and I think so far that's went over well. And effectively, I ended up sacrificing my salary for that because I think that was the right thing to do for my employees.
Yeah, and I think it's across industries. Like even in higher ed, I know plenty of professors who are doing, dual jobs. And I know a lot of people. The art of the side hustle is becoming even more pronounced over the last 3 or 4 years. So I think that's common. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. It seems like that's kind of the norm where it's hard for the initial employer to keep up with that huge inflation jump. that happened. And so it's like, and I agree. I think I had it calculated about 15-20% over the last, I don't know, 4 years or something. I'd have to double check, but I'm right in line with where you're at. Like that's the new norm, if you will. We've lost about 20% of our buying power. I mean,
And
companies
that's
aren't,
tough.
and
Yeah.
companies can't make that all up. And so it's like you're just chipping away, but feels like a losing battle.
Yeah. It's so tough. Can you imagine giving everybody the $200 and doing a $20 a week per check to try to be helpful, and it's still not enough, right? And you don't even have it to give, and it's pretty brutal. But that's why people like me are in the position I'm in. I choose it, and this is the challenge that I choose to be in. And if I can't pull it off, I need to go do something else. So we just try to meet the challenge every way we can. And I always say, right or wrong, nobody can fault me for the effort, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah. One other thing I wanted to talk about too is you have an employee wellness center that's amazing, and of course we talked about the power of story, and that's kind of, you have a mural on your wall about kind of the background of the company, the Isaac's Pool's history, which is really cool. And then you got pool tables and workout gear, and I think you have a swim spa in there. So you got, I mean, it's an amazing facility. What are your thoughts on, like, do employees take advantage of that, or did that become kind of a norm thing where they're like they take it for granted and then never use it? Or I mean,
So I had read in numerous publications in my own industry, people creating these spaces and felt that it was necessary to do it. And I ended up just having this 3,000 square foot space that could have been storage. And I decided that after reading some of that and thinking, hey, that's a good idea, to go ahead and build it. Now I did go over the top a little bit with those murals and creating this kind of ode to my family, because I don't beat people over the head with the family history. I don't think they like that, but it's there, right? It's in that place, and we can talk a little bit about it. And every time they're in there, it reminds them of it. But do people use it? Yeah. It's do people go in there individually working out? That's not what I see. But we use it for events. That's where I use it for all of our events for the company. We just had our Christmas party there this Saturday. And then but what I see them doing is using it for like Christmas parties, Thanksgivings, birthday parties for their family, because it's free. Spaces aren't cheap these days. And so, yeah, it's made some impact. Do they all use it? They don't. Would I like to see them use it more? I would. But I do think it makes some difference. I do think there's a wow factor there when you hire somebody. There's a wow factor that, hey, this guy's got this place. Now, if they use it, it's like when you buy the new elliptical. You might be excited and use it for a few weeks and not. It may feel like that a little bit, but that excitement does get their attention and does give me the ability to hire people, I think, and may say yes a little bit more because I have it. But over time, though, I think the employees have enjoyed using it for their group functions more than anything, and they all know it's there for them. And just saying that to them, hey, if you have your kids and you want to have a birthday party and have nowhere to go, then this space is something you can use. They light up when you say that because you're speaking right to them, their family, and they've already had a bunch of birthdays that cost them a fortune, right? At whatever fun venue they went to, and so in that case, it works pretty good.
what I noticed that get at the end of the day when your employees are saying it's like family around here, like I used to always, or I used to have a boss that would say, "Let's go team," and everyone's like, "We're whatever." Like the team doesn't, like we're a team. Like, we make auto parts. Like, yes. Um. So like it never really landed because we knew it was like, I don't know, calling us a team. It was like we're forced to be a team, but we don't really want to be. Or not necessarily want to be, but it's just a job. So I think what's interesting is it's just authenticity. Like I know you can learn a lot about a lot of these things in a business class, or here's how you motivate and this and that. But then at the end of the day, if you're not authentic, or you don't really care, it'll just come off as like you're doing a checklist item. So I think you've done both. Like the theory or in the practical application, but if you're not authentic about it, if you don't really care that people can't come, like the birthday thing, for example, they can come in and do birthday parties. You don't just do that for, okay, well that'll help them be happier, and I check that box, but like you truly care. So I'm kind of rambling, but any thoughts to take us out, I guess, on building like a cohesive kind of, I hate to say family, but um
You're right. I feel icky when I say family and team, so I rarely say those words. Um, but that is what it becomes, and it's because of the authenticity. Authenticity is a word that you hear a lot right now. especially in the political world and especially in the last couple years. I just think people are
How to
starved.
appear authentic. It's like, well, that's you're defeating the purpose.
Yeah, yeah, you can appear, and you just have to be authentic, and sometimes that's pretty, and sometimes it's not, but you prefer to know what you're getting, and you know what you're getting in people when you know it comes from a good place, and it helps in this business that I did most of it, and so there's a lot that they do that I know how to do as well. So there's a certain amount of respect that happens there, but I just think in general, I'm just speaking for small businesses. You have to have your finger on the pulse of what's happening. And if you have an upset employee, more than likely they're not going to tell you why. You got to get to the bottom of it, and when you get to the bottom of it, it's usually something that was simple that you didn't even that it's unreal that they didn't tell you that anyway. But I think you just have to address those employee situations quickly. When it comes to payroll questions, I typically have those dealt with in the same day. I do not let those go. If it's, hey, my check had a PTO on there that was not supposed to be, or something like that, those things get handled immediately. I think just doing the work, it's simple. We just use an Outlook calendar. So when you're hired, your birthday goes on. It's very simple. That's where I go. I see it on there and I text them. It's not complicated, but you just have to put the effort in and be authentic. And genuinely, I want to text them happy birthday, and I think they know that about me. And I think they know that they're in the sacred space that is our rec center. They see the history and they know that I am a person who's just a part of it, right? I didn't build everything that's here. There's a way bigger picture that gives such authenticity to your company. It helps whenever they come in and say, hey, I remember when Granddaddy Bill Isaacs did this or that, right? Then they realize there is a bigger history and people are here because of people who aren't me. So I don't know that every company can have that. I'm very blessed to have that 46-year history that gives us that. And but I just think ultimately it's all about the time and the work. Like you said, it's not about cracking open the book, knowing the theory, getting the degree. It's all about your genuine care of your employees and what you're willing to do to keep that alive and well with them.
As far as, because this is a Herzbergian episode, I don't even know if that's a word, but Herzberg episode. And I consulted with you with the Herzberg. I guess again, if what advice do you have for companies out there if they were trying to figure out, like, okay, I've got employees that I think could be happier or something like that? Could they use this model?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you can do a lot yourself, but it's very important to get help and have an outside perspective into how employees are perceived or perceive you or your company. And, we obviously had you come check out our employees, and that was a very good experience. Not only reading the book and looking at Herzberg, that was very helpful, but those employees opened up to you. And whenever you came back and gave the presentation to us, it was pretty eye opening, right? I mean, just because I think I know my employees don't mean that I know them, and they were able to open up to you in such a way um, that your presentation to me and our executive team, allowed us to make a lot of adjustments. So, that let's call it audit of the employees or engagement with the employees with you, it meant a lot, and I will say I opened up some eyes, particularly with the training, because training is one of those hygiene factors. Are you training people properly, or they're not going to be happy? And you pointed out quite a bit of stuff to us that was helpful there. So, I had read the book on my own, but the two-factor theory and the way you do the worksheets and your book has those. Man, that's just real world practical stuff you can do today to help make your business better. And having a professional come in, and it could be you or whoever somebody knows or feels comfortable with, letting somebody else get the perspective from your employees will do a lot to help you be a lot better.